If you are a guest with us this evening, if you do not have a church family where you can go on Sunday mornings, we'd love to have you join us here at Violet. We have 2 services on Sunday mornings, one at 9:30 and the other at 11. And I just wanted to let you guys know about that. We're so glad that you've come this evening. Before we start, why don't we go to the Lord in prayer? Father, I thank you for this evening. Thank you for Eric Pennington and just for placing just this evening on his heart to bring it to us, God. We just are so grateful that you know us, that you love us, that you care for us. In your word, you mentioned that you even knew us when we were being formed in our mother's womb. You know us that well. God, we're thankful that when we go into the valley, you go there with us, and you're even deeper still. And God, we've had so many things happen in our culture that have been really difficult lately. And we just ask, as we go in tonight, as we talk about this topic of mental wellness, I pray that you would help us by giving us better understanding. Thank you for each one that's here tonight. Thank you for our presenters, God. I pray that you'd bless them in a special way tonight as well. We give this evening to you, Father, in your name, amen. Many of you know Eric Pennington, but I'm going to turn it over to him now. Eric Pennington is one of the members of our church, and I'm so grateful to call him friend. So, Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, welcome, everyone, and hopefully you can hear me okay. Is my mic on? Oh, I get thumbs up. That's great. That's wonderful. So glad that you made it here tonight. This is first in what we hope will be many of these kind of sessions. And, tonight my hope, and Brian's prayer was so on mark, is that you will hear the Lord speak to you personally. And you are going to come here tonight, I know, with potentially things are just really good. You might come here tonight because you're looking for answers. And my hope and my prayer for you is that God is meeting you here tonight with some of what we're going to talk about. And maybe even as we come toward the last part of the session, where you can ask questions to hopefully just further that. So with that, I want to introduce to you our guest tonight. To my left, this is Leslie Hanson from Directions Counseling and Anita Rowe from Directions Counseling. And what I'd like to do is just to start off with you guys, I would just ask you maybe how long you've been in practice and maybe how long you've been with Directions Counseling, and then we will dig right in.
All right. Well, is this on? Thank you. I'll find it eventually. Hello. Thank you. So I attended Ashland Seminary up in Ashland, Ohio, and graduated back in 2005, and I've been practicing since 2003. I think we started interning earlier. And I've been at Directions Counseling going on my 10th year in just a few months.
Awesome.
Okay, I've been in the field for 10 years and just recently moved to the area in June, so I've been at Directions since then.
All right, perfect. So the first thing I wanted to ask tonight, and I know we've talked outside of the stage, and that's been awesome, but the big question that many people have is, why is it important in maintaining and nourishing and taking care of your mental health? Maybe I'll start with you, Leslie, and then to you, Anita.
Sure. Well, I believe that God created us with a lot of different aspects. He created us with a body, which is the biological aspect of how we operate. He created us with a mind to be able to think things, make good, healthy choices for ourselves. He created us with a relationship, whether that is the horizontal relationship with one another or the vertical relationship with the Father. And he also created us with the Spirit, that is to connect with our Lord on a deeper level. So I believe we have to look at all aspects of our life, not just how we're eating, what we're putting in our body, who we're talking to, or how often we're praying, but we also have to look at it from a sense of, what am I thinking about? How am I taking my thoughts captive? How are my thoughts honoring the Lord? So
Okay, that's great. And I know in a little bit too, we'll touch about some of those multiple areas that require our care. But Anita, what are some of your thoughts around
Yeah,
that?
I would just add that, when we don't take care of ourselves in any way, like it breaks down. So if, it might take a minute for nutrition, lack of nutrition to catch up to your body, but it's going to happen eventually. And the same thing emotionally, when our mental health isn't taken care of, you're going to eventually lose some resilience and maybe end up in our office saying, "Help me."
Yeah, and I know that I could probably get in trouble with the church for saying this because I could keep going on this subject because you just hit on some things and I'm going, okay, so I'm going to go off the script. I'm going to ask you, how did we get to this place, right, where mental health it got forgotten, if you will? So any thoughts around that?
Are you talking about the church, society?
Society, mostly. I mean, and certainly the church.
Yeah.
I know because I guess from a transparency standpoint, I believe that maybe we've kind of faltered inside of the body too, as far as addressing it. Because what Leslie was saying is so on mark. Is like he made us a whole person, right? So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think historically, mental health has been taboo.
Okay.
Only people, in the streets, hearing voices and acting crazy had mental health problems. But that's not the case. Like we all have maybe some problems under stress or going through difficulties. And so to recognize if I feel overwhelmed too often, like that's a mental health problem, and it's okay to want to address that or learn some coping skills. And it doesn't mean you're broken or crazy.
Yeah, yeah. So from that perspective, do you feel like that makes it harder sometimes for people to say, I think I need some help? Or is it a case of, they just kind of turn and go the other way? Or maybe it's both.
Yeah, I think, so many people who end up in our offices have been like, I've always like just pushed through and been okay, and I'm not used to feeling this way. So a lot of people have a lot of resilience, throughout their life, but eventually so many overwhelming things or traumas or stressors catch up, and they don't know what to do with it at that point. So we're just there to provide, how to get through that and learn
Right.
to take care of yourself so it doesn't happen again.
I kind of use the tongue-in-cheek analogy of if I walked into the building and I was bleeding like crazy out of my arm or something, what would the first thing that someone would tell me? It's like, Eric, we need to get you to a doctor. You're bleeding, but then when we encounter that issue, like you said, being overwhelmed too often, we go, no, I can handle it. No, well, I'm going to be fine. Or maybe in the Christian realm, it's I'm going to pray about it, right? So this is probably a good time to just go to those areas of life. And I know, Leslie, when we were talking online a few weeks ago, you used the analogy or the imagery of these 4 areas of our lives that need attention, right? And if I remember correctly, you said that when somebody begins to see you in a counseling environment, those things are addressed. Can you talk a little bit about those 4 areas?
Sure. One of the things that Eric promised me is he would keep me on task, and I have ADD, so I go in a lot of different directions. So
I told her I was her friend, and I am.
So I kind of answered this with the first question. But so as I mentioned, there are 4 parts. And when we do an intake with a new client, we look at it from 4 major components: bio, psycho, social, and spiritual. So biologically is the idea of, do you have any intestinal issues? Do you have some gut reactions to things where you're like, oh, I'm running to the bathroom a little bit more than I should, or I'm not going to the bathroom? Are you running into the idea of I'm getting chronic headaches? Are you running into issues where you've got pain in your body and you're not sure why? Well, we like to look at those things because we think, is there a possibility that some of this could be an outcome of stress? So that's biological. Psychological is the idea of what are we thinking about? What are the worries that we have? Is it difficult for us to fall asleep at night because we're ruminating about different things that we get stuck on? Are we getting into gossip about things because we feel like, I just need someone to talk to? and it's maybe not the healthiest people, or maybe it's not the healthiest version of us that is sharing things. So we've got to make sure that I always use the analogy of holding our thoughts out in front of us. Then we've got the sociological. What are my friendships like? What is my relationship like with my girlfriend, boyfriend, spouse, parents, siblings, friends? All of that can end up, it can take a toll on us if we're not dealing with things in a healthy way. We're not the best version of ourselves anymore. We come home and we find that we're a little bit more irritable, a little bit more angry, a little bit more frustrated, kicking the dog, doing whatever we got to do just to kind of get through. And then spiritually, sometimes what we find in our offices is the fact that people are struggling with their faith because, unfortunately, sometimes we look at God like a genie in the bottle. You know, it's the idea of, well, I prayed and prayed and prayed, and my prayers didn't get answered. And so we want to recognize, is there a situation in your spiritual life that could impact your faith as well? So we look at it on the whole person, the 4 components that are really going to, we want to see what needs to be addressed. So I look at it kind of like a pie, and there are some parts of your pie that are whole pieces of pie. And there's other parts of your pie that are just really small portions. And so we're like, how can we get it where you're working at a very healthy, in a very healthy direction on each one of those, biologically, psychologically, socially, and spiritually?
Okay, that's great. So that leads me to, and that's great information. I grew up in an environment where the idea of a counselor or clinician, it wasn't necessarily frowned upon, but it was just something where you culturally, no, we don't do that, right? It had a stigma, right? Because to your point, Anita, you're talking about the imagery of somebody who's on the street and they're talking to themselves and it seems like they're disheveled and unkept or whatever. And it'd be easy to say, oh, but that's when I was a kid. I'm an adult now. But I'm always interested in how the things as a kid get carried into adulthood and they become so normalized, right? So I'm not, obviously I don't have the ability to know what's going on with those who are in the audience tonight or those who might be watching this online at some point. How do you know you need a clinician? Are there certain signals, certain markers that you might want to say, this might be a time to explore it in depth? And feel free to talk a little bit about that stigma thing too, because I do think it's still relevant. So maybe Anita, you wanna start?
Yeah, I would say, that childhood thing, if it feels normal, but something isn't going well in life, then maybe we need to look at how normal is it.
Wow. Yeah.
It affects relationships, how you got parented or how you were treated in school or in the neighborhood, your perceptions of what you took on. I call them unspoken messages that we perceive to believe whether somebody, verbally called you stupid, you're taking on that message, or if you were treated in a way, now you believe you're stupid or not good enough, that's going to affect all of your interactions with other people, affecting self-esteem, and which might lead to depression or anxiety. So it's like this big snowball effect, and affect relationships in adulthood, or just how you perceive the world. Can you believe in yourself, to go to college or make some goals happen for yourself?
So, and Leslie, I want to come to you, but one of the things that you said about that idea of how is it working for you, I think that's so powerful, right? I mean, and it's so simple. It's like, okay, I'm behaving X and Y and Z. What are the results of me doing that? If we say to ourselves, well, it's not working out very well, ding, right? There's now an opportunity, and maybe you need help to kind of process that through. I just think that's a really big, it's an aha for me. It's like, it's very simple. How is it working for me? But Leslie, please, from your perspective.
Well, the only thing I want to say is one of the things that we learned when we were becoming counselors is the idea that counselors need counselors too. I firmly believe that it's those of us who have been broken a few times that make the best counselors, because we don't look at it as there's something wrong with you. We look at it as, tell us your story, because what you're going through is a normal response to an abnormal situation. And when it becomes a little bit too much, where you feel like I'm not living the best version of myself anymore, I'm questioning myself, I'm having trouble making decisions, this is impacting some of my relationships. I think for the lay person out there, I think it's the idea of just get into a counselor to talk about it. It doesn't mean you're going to be in counseling for the rest of your life, but it's the idea of, can I just explore some things? Our goal is always, can we normalize what you're going through and then analyze, is your coping strategy the best use of your coping strategy? Or is it going to possibly impact you in a negative way because you keep going back to that old coping strategy? But it's all normal. It just may not be healthy sometimes.
So funny. Before we went on tonight, excuse me, you talked about a client. I don't think it was a specific client. You didn't use names and all that good stuff, but about them saying, you wouldn't believe what I, it was kind of that setting, right? And I think you guys both kind of said, trust me, I probably have heard this. So we might think going into seeing a clinician, right, is like we're going to surprise them with our big issue. But more than likely, especially with you guys practicing as long as you have, you've seen a lot, right?
Yeah, we were saying it's do I want to say the word heartbreaking? I mean, it's sometimes heartbreaking when people come into us and believe, I don't know that my counselor can handle my story. Because a lot of people believe what they're going through is so unique. And it is unique to them, but I don't know that it's unique in a worldwide perspective.
Wow. Yeah. So I'm going to start this one with you, Anita. What are some of the issues that you see? Obviously, all of us tonight, we've heard, the T word. But what are some of the issues that you see coming into seeking your help?
Yeah, a big one is trauma, of course. 99% of people have been through trauma of some sort, and if they haven't, it's just not yet. So that, is always the case, but that's not always why they're there, right? So there's a lot of anxiety and depression that comes along with any of that. And I want to just throw out a few techniques for you guys maybe to take home with you. So when I have a client dealing, say, with generalized anxiety, we talk about what are their thoughts, because a lot of anxiety happens in that thought process. So something, and I'll just give a few, but there's many, but is there evidence of this thought? Right? So if I'm afraid to go into the store because people are going to look at me and judge me, looking for the evidence means I'm looking around to see who's just standing there watching me. People are just putting cereal in their cart, right? They're checking out the clothes. They're just there to shop. And, most people are not going to be just looking to see what's wrong with you. And so when you look for the evidence and it's not there, that helps take some of the power away from the anxiety. So there might still be a little bit, but it's lessened. Another one would be, are there alternative possibilities to think about this situation? So, for example, there's that person, they're looking at me, which means it's a judgment. Well, first of all, we're drawing a thought bubble over their head and making an assumption, right? We're filling in their thoughts, which we don't actually know. So what seems to be evidence sometimes is not evidence. So what else might be a reason why they're looking at you? Maybe they recognize you and they're trying to figure out how they know you. Maybe they like your outfit, or they're wondering where you got the cool shoes. Maybe they're looking at the item behind you. Or here's one that sometimes gets a chuckle. What if they're anxious and they're wondering who's staring at them, right? So that happens a lot. So, one more I'll give would be to ask yourself, when there is a situation you're going through that you're super anxious about, you're concerned about something, I would say, what's the best that could come out of this in spite of your concern? So, there might be a new parent, what we call a helicopter parent, right? Who has a 3-year-old or a baby, and like the in-laws want to take the child home overnight. Oh no, like they need me, I'm the best one to take care of my child, all the things. So the first thing I would say is this child going to be safe with these people? Oh yes, absolutely. I know they'll be taken care of. Okay, so it's not a safety concern. What's the best that could happen, even though you're worried? Well, the 3-year-old would love to be with grandparents. They'd have a really good time. And I know like they would bond and connect, and I would probably get a full night of sleep, and I'd have a date with my husband. And okay, so do you hear? In spite of the worry. And we can do that too when there has actually been something bad that happened. A lot of times, you lose a loved one and you're grieving. Are there good things that have come out of it? A lot of times families come together, unfortunately not always, but families can come together through grief, or you got closer to God through that time. So looking for some good outcomes in spite of a bad situation. And then I'll just, if it's okay.
Yes, please.
I'll just turn over into depression. If people have depression, and some go-tos would be, let's look at 3 small tasks to do today or every day that's possible. Is do a task of accomplishment. You have to get up and do something that helps you feel like you achieved something. And depending on the level of depression, that might mean just getting up and getting a shower, okay? Or if that's already happening, what's the next smallest thing to do? So it might be, okay, I'll put the dishes in the dishwasher. So a task of accomplishment, a way to connect with somebody is really important. So whether it's sending a text to somebody, and you don't always have to talk about, oh, I'm feeling so sad today. Like maybe it's just, hey, how are you doing? Like I need a distraction. What's going on in your life? So connecting, a text, a phone call, go to the neighbors, preferably to get out and go see somebody, but that's not always possible. And the last thing would be a task of self-care. So again, that might be the shower, or it might be, the busy parent who just got home from work. It might be for them saying no to something that they shouldn't take on, or taking a nap, or, getting a pedicure. So at home. So just some small things to just increase just feeling good about your day. And you might not feel wonderful, but how can we make it one step better than just staying in bed and being miserable? A lot of times people who suffer from anxiety and depression have learned their normal is to just go with the thoughts and the feelings, right? That's their go-to. Oh, I feel bad, so I'm just going to stay in this state. And we always encourage, hey, let's challenge that. Like, let's do something to pull ourselves out. And we can't just snap our finger and it's gone, but we can work on coping skills. And then, of course, depending on the severity, do we need to refer for medication? But a lot of times people want coping skills, before seeking medication. So we work.
And Anita, you just hit something there in the beginning, and the idea of the coping skills, which makes me think about intentionality, right? One of the things that I learned, I've learned many things from my wife. This was a big one, right? Ask yourself, is what you're thinking true? Now, I'm one of those, I need to ask it, is it really true?
Because you always believe it's true, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Right? You know?
Yeah.
And I have found that to be such an effective strategy. I kind of liken it because I like the imagery of the Holy Spirit tapping me on the shoulder and said, hey, Eric, is that really true? Is it really true? And it does. It kind of frees you up to go, well, wait a minute. No, I don't know if they're looking at me because of X, or I don't know if that's really, I may feel like I'm not the greatest at something, but no one's ever told me that I wasn't great at it. No one's ever, there's been no verdict, there's no audition. But as much as I say that, it doesn't just magically happen every day. I had to make it an intentional strategy. And maybe I'm going to come, Leslie, to you and your perspective on this one, but Can you speak to that intentionality? Is it important? I mean, I know it was for me, but that's my perspective.
Yes.
That's the easiest question of the night.
No, just to expand though, I talk to people all the time about giving these, I call them validity scales, 0 to 10. How true is it?
Oh, wow.
It doesn't
That's
have
good.
to be a yes that it's 100% true or a no that it's 100% false, but it's the idea of how true is it? So I like to look at, and I like to also realize the only reason that I feel a certain way is because of what I believe. So if I can first look at my emotion and say, what emotion am I feeling? I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling hurt. I'm feeling agitated. We got to realize the only reason that we feel what we feel is because of what we believe. And is there a possibility if I hold that belief out in front of me and I look at it and I say, just because I thought it, does it make it gospel truth? Or can I challenge it to say, on a 0 to 10 rating scale, it's really probably only a 2. But it's so real for me because I thought it. We embrace every thought that we have as if it's gospel truth. And until we start holding our thoughts out in front of us, we're going to get stuck into a lot of emotions that we don't want. So that's where it comes into the concept of being able to challenge and dispute and say, okay, if this belief is causing me this feeling, how can I challenge that belief and maybe have a different emotion? So that's the intentionality. It's the idea of, can I realize that my thoughts are just thoughts? They may not be truths.
Yeah. And I speak to that intentionality too, just from the perspective that, and the exercise analogies get worn out, I know, but the reality is that if you're trying to build muscle, you can't go in the gym one time and then walk out and then voila, right? And I think it really struck me too, because Anita, you were talking about the anxiety, and I saw this article in the Wall Street Journal that it may have been the Health and Human Services Department was now asking doctors, like typical family primary care physicians, to screen for anxiety. I think it was the drill was if under 65, that needs to be a standard part of the intake, right? And I wondered as I read that, it's like, wow, is that a result of the pandemic? Because I'd never heard such an official statement around anxiety. Is that just, as I'm kind of going off of where we were going there for a minute, but have you found that it's that prevalent?
Well, I know as a counselor, it's one of the things that I commonly send out, and I ask, what are the symptoms that you're going through? But
Right.
we do what's called the GAD, the Generalized Anxiety Disorder Scale, yeah. And then, but we can also look at the Beck Anxiety Disorder Scale. There's a lot of inventories out there. And so it's just a good idea to, figure out, where are you at? And so we want to know, where do you believe that you're at? And I don't know how much doctors have changed their protocol, but I know as a counselor, I'm certainly changing mine to ask, where is your anxiety right now?
Yeah, so there's some consistency there. Go ahead, Anita.
I've also noticed, like, some people have anxiety, but they don't realize that's what it is, right? Especially if it's their norm growing up. They had anxiety as a child. They just thought that was, the way everybody was. But then, usually over time it increases and they're like, oh, like something's wrong here, but I don't really understand. Like,
Okay.
I know as an adult, 20 years ago, like, I did not know what a panic attack was, but when my throat was closing off and like I had to sit down, like later I was like, I think that was a panic attack,
Right.
Like, and so just learning, like, not everybody's symptoms are the same. Not every situation brings on the same kind of reactions. One thing I do want to add is when somebody's having a trauma response, anxiety from a trauma response, that needs to be treated differently. Yes, with all these coping skills, but in those cases, we have to get to the root of the trauma. You know,
Yeah.
we can't just gloss over it. We have to like go into that and again, like change that perception as much as possible.
So for the audience, as we're throwing out a number of these things and these strategies and these ideas, the expectation is that you don't have to come to a counselor all prepared with, okay, I'm feeling this, I did this, and now what do we do? I think it's like what you were saying, Leslie, make that appointment and tell us your story. That's where it begins. Is that?
Yeah, it's intriguing because sometimes we'll receive phone calls and people will say, I'm just struggling in this relationship. And as we get to know people and we ask more questions, we start to realize that most things that people bring in are thematic. They have found a theme in their life around anxiety, around abandonment, around feeling out of control. And so what we're doing is saying, can we get back to the root? If we can pull something out at the root, as Nita said, you've got a higher likelihood of more of a full recovery. And we really prefer to work with somebody when we know that they are noticing something fresh. There's a difference between an acute stress disorder versus post-traumatic stress disorder. And it depends on the longevity of how long you've lived with something. So the sooner that you experience something and you start to notice something kind of feels off, it's a better time because we've got a higher likelihood of treating it before it becomes something chronic and starts impacting your physical health as well.
Wow, that's powerful. And I can think from my own experiences of thinking that I could tough my way through, right? And the first encounter that I had with directions counseling was with Brett Castle, and who was phenomenal, helped me in so many ways to see things that I mean, had become so foggy for me. And for the audience, at some point, if Brett ever decides he's coming out of retirement, right, we'll have him here too. Maybe he'll even do it even without being. But one of the things that, as you guys were talking, and I'm thinking about this idea that I think sometimes we feel like God is like this master sergeant, and we've got to make sure that our uniform is on this just the right way, and we're marching in right step. And quite frankly, it's almost like well, God's not going to love me as much if I don't have the uniform on properly and I don't march correctly. And this kind of takes me to this idea about the stigmatism, the stigma of it, and that block. So, as we all know, right, there are things that God specifically can and will only do. It's not for us to tackle. But then there's also some things that God wants us to manage and to take care of, right? I'll tell you just this funny story really quickly, and then I want to get to the question. I'm talking to a relative, and they're very much, well, God can do a miracle. God can do a miracle, and it can be fixed like that, Eric. And I go, you're right. I agree with you. I believe miracles happen that way. They do. I do. I said, you know, there's these other miracles. I don't know if you've heard about them. It's a phone, and it's if you dial it, you can reach an office. And there's a clinician there, and you can talk to them, and they'll even make an appointment. It is miraculous. And I'm saying that, right, and that was a funny conversation, but it was kind of my way of just, let's lower this down. I mean, God's active in even these very small incidental things. I think sometimes we get into this where we're looking for the skies to open, the lightning to strike, the seas to part, and then we're fixed. So, the question. When it comes to our self-care, the things that we do tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon, and all the rest, what are some of those things that we're kind of responsible for that you would say that we should all be doing? And just pick a few of whatever comes to your mind.
Can I start with a little small story?
Absolutely.
So Probably about 8 years ago, I went down to a residential treatment centers. They would invite clinicians in, and they would have the clinicians actually go through a lot of the processes of the people that were going to be getting residential treatment. And one of the things, and there was probably about 60 of us clinicians there, and we had to put on a mask. We had to blindfold ourselves. That right there freaked me out. And then we had to grab a hold of a rope that was next to us, and we had to put our arm on the person in front of us so that we didn't lose pace with the group. So they said, the goal is when you think that you found the exit, raise your hand. We will come to you. You will whisper in our ear that you found the exit. If you've not found it, just keep looking, raise your hand. So I keep hearing, it's the idea of someone raises their hand and they'll come over and say yes, and they'll say whatever they would say to the person. I wouldn't hear what they were saying. And then you'd hear people clapping, because I'm like, oh, they got out. Good for them. I think I'm going to find it. I know where it's at. So I keep going around, and I keep hearing people clapping, and someone else gets out, and someone else gets out, and I'm like, I know there are only 60 people in this room, and I swear I've heard 59 get out. So, and I kept raising my hand, and they would say, what do you need? And I'm like, is this it? Nope, keep going. So then I get to another place that I thought was it, and they'd say, what do you need? And I'm like, the answer. This isn't it. I'd say, okay. So I did this like 6 times. At one point, I literally sat down because I was so frustrated. I thought, I'm just sitting on this floor. I don't care. I was the last one because I failed to say one word. Who knows what that word might be? Help. I could not, out of 60 people, of clinicians in a room, I couldn't say help. And boy, if you tell me that wasn't a moment for me, I was bawling at the end of this experiential because I realized it is really hard to say help. So first of all, I want to say just to pick up a phone, it is miraculous from a client's perspective that they have the ability to pick up a phone. So kudos to anybody who picks up a phone. So I just wanted to give that story first of all.
That's a great story.
Thank you. What was your question?
Yes. So what are some of the things that you would
Saying help is a good
right, we'll start with that.
self-care strategy. I think anything that we can do that creates a little bit of tuning into our senses. I believe God has given us a beautiful ability to smell, to taste, to see, to touch, and we stop being mindful. We go throughout life where we're just putting one foot in front of the other, and we're worrying about what's 5 miles ahead of us or 5 years behind us. And it's the idea of, what if I just sit in the present moment and notice there's a leather chair and I can feel some metal. I can feel that my legs are crossed. I can look out and see the faces of the people and really bright lights in front of me. I can feel a little bit of the heat from the light, okay? It's the idea of this is the moment. I have no idea what time it is, but I'm guessing it's probably close to 8 o'clock. And I know that this is a Tuesday night. This is the idea of being present. I can notice that I've got a dry mouth a little bit. That is practicing the presence of the moment. And I think it's also the idea of how do we practice the presence of God and realize that we serve an omnipresent God who's with us always. And so I think that also goes back to self-care.
Yeah. So Anita, I'm going to go at it from the other angle, but the other view, right? Of what are some of the things you think are God's responsibilities? Like only He is going to do or take care of.
I'm glad you got that question.
Yeah, it's a heavy one. Let's see. So I would say, when we look for validation of our worth, right? A lot of times, myself included, have looked externally. Are people complimenting us? Are we having a good enough work ethic or treating this relationship in a certain way to make other people happy? And are we, receiving, whatever we think is validating? I know for me, I specifically remember an aha moment, like, oh, like I no longer need this certain thing from other people to feel good enough. Right? So I still need, we all need things from other people, but it was no longer about my worth, because that comes from here and from here. But it's a process, right? So everybody that comes along, like, can get discouraged or, think that it's too hard. But it's well worth the journey, and it's a continual journey, right? So God provides our worth. Our sense of well-being should come from Him and declaring who we are. And I just recently, under discouragement, like, wrote a list. Okay, I am a child of God. I am loved. I am beautiful. Like, these things that are hard to believe, right? But I needed to encourage myself. So
It comes back to the intentionality thing again. I'm hearing that so loudly from both of you. This idea that, we have to be on offense about this, right? Because I know from my experience in years gone by, it was all about the performance. Okay, I don't need that. I can do it. I can figure this out. I can. And to your story is so wonderful. This idea, I didn't ask for help, because I kind of had fooled myself I can figure this out, right? And when you talk about validation, because we all are in a world that continually messages us about who we should be, where we should live, where we should work. Let's kind of, maybe sort of the last question here as we want to open it up for the audience. What are some techniques, some things that we can do to help combat those messages that continually kind of are coming at us, whether it be from a spiritual, vertical view or just even horizontal?
I mean, I think the first thing is like, okay, is this even a true statement I'm telling myself, right? Or is this need, am I seeking it out from the right source?
Okay, there, Anita, you just, that was a good one. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you, but say that one again.
Are we seeking it from the right source? So that need for validation or worth, unfortunately, our last source we seek is from God, right? That should be the first one. And just to learn, like it takes some learning to learn how to think. Like you said, like just because we think something doesn't mean it's true, but if we start to channel our thoughts towards like how God wants us to view ourselves or other people even, there's a lot to be said about that. And I also wanted to speak a little bit on like when we view God, and I know in my upbringing, I'm like, oh, God has that stick, he's just waiting, like you don't have the uniform on, like he's gonna get out that stick and take you out. And also like the message of you have anxiety, you have depression, well, you just don't have enough faith. Ooh. Right? You just gotta pray more. Your faith isn't strong enough, and it's a sin because God says, do not be afraid. Right? I heard those messages, and now I'm like, wait a minute, I've been a parent, right? My 3-year-old has fallen, and I think women probably tend to be a little bit more nurturing in this way, but like...
No offense.
But dads too can say, you know what, it's okay, I've got you. Like they're scared to get on the roller coaster or, whatever. They're afraid of the water. Like, it's okay, I've got you. Like, don't be afraid, I'm right here. Like, I think the message should be about, like, God's support rather than you don't have enough faith, you're not believing in me right now, you doubting Thomas, you.
Yeah. Do you think that sometimes comes from, I mean, obviously it's a mischaracterization of who God is, right? But I sometimes wonder if we've kind of gotten into this mode because we are taking our cues from a world system that seems to always be in opposition to Him. Does that ring true?
I mean, I've heard these things from the pulpit, right? So but maybe it comes from fatherhood, right? A lot of times we view God as who our father was.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, society sees God sometimes as a tyrant, like because bad things happen to good people. Like, how could God let that happen? And I
Yeah.
like to say, like, God doesn't make bad things happen. Bad things happen because sin is in the world. Like, there's disease in the world because of sin. And, it's never God's will for a child to be molested. It's never God's will for your spouse to cheat on you or, for you to be taken down in some form or fashion. But can God use it? Absolutely.
Right.
God does
So-
not waste pain.
Yeah. So Leslie, I'm going to give you an opportunity, and then sort of the truly last thing, I want to kind of end our time together in conversation with some uplifting things. Not that any of this hasn't been uplifting for you, so don't let me say that. But Leslie, go ahead. What were some of your things that you were thinking there?
About techniques?
Yeah.
Yeah, so are you guys willing to do a little experiential with me? Okay, good. Thank you for the two of you that spoke up. For the whole group. So I'm wondering if you're willing, okay, I just want you to shut your eyes, okay? And I'm gonna do it with you, but I just want you to notice what's going on in your body, doing kind of like a head to toe body scan and just notice what's going on in your body. Notice what feeling you could attach to what's going on inside of your body right now. And as you notice that feeling, I want you to put a color on that feeling inside of your body. And notice what that word inside of your body is doing. Is it moving? Is it sitting still? I want you to notice how loud that word is inside of your body. Even notice the texture of it. If it is moving, is there any texture to it? This is all just a feeling that is inside of your body. And notice the size of that inside of your body. And as you're noticing that, if it's something that feels really good and like a blessing, I want you to notice how can you get more of that inside of your bodies. Notice where more would come in. If it is something that's negative, I want you to see something lighter come into your body. And I want you to notice what that new word might feel like as it comes in contact with that other word. Notice the color of the new word, the new feeling. Notice its size and its texture as well. Notice the sound of it. How loud. Is it a dull sound? Is it a exciting sound? Just notice it. And as you invite more of that goodness in, just notice what it does to the other feelings inside. And then I want you just to notice, can you find Jesus in that new feeling, in that new space? And notice when you recognize it's the gift of the Spirit, what does that do inside your body? So just take a deep breath in through your nose. Sit with it for a second. And then blow it out slowly through your mouth. And then if you're willing, you can open your eyes back up. My hope is that you can recognize you've got a little bit more control over yourself than you're giving yourself credit for. A lot of times we feel very out of control. But just that little 3 to 5 minute exercise says, I can invite something better into my life that I may not have been counting on. And I can sit with that and recognize it may be involving the presence of the Lord.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so last question. Think of a patient. What's been an inspiring breakthrough that maybe they've made? Obviously, not sharing details, names, and all that good stuff, but something where someone's had a breakthrough, where it's given them a lift, a smile on their face. Can you think of maybe one? Recent or past, whatever.
Yeah, so this one happened actually several years ago, not in the area. But I had a mother that was having some health issues. She wasn't taking care of herself, and she was a single mom of a 16 or 17-year-old daughter. And of course, she loved her daughter so much. She's like, I just have to live until my daughter is 18. I'm like, oh, like that's your goal, is to just live until your daughter's an adult. I'm like, that's kind of sad. Like, and she talked all the time about how much she loved her daughter. I said, it sounds like you'd be willing to die for your daughter. Absolutely, absolutely, which is why I need to make sure she gets to adulthood. I said, what would it be like to live for your daughter? And she's like, and came back the next time, completely different perspective of like what that would mean. Like, can she love her daughter in a different way and live and enjoy life and take care of herself and see a future? It changed her life, and like, I give the credit to God. Like, I don't know where those words came from, but it was life-changing and made an impression on me as well.
Ah, that's awesome. Leslie, how about you?
I'm thinking back probably about 15 years ago. I had a client who had just experienced a severe trauma, and thankfully she thought it was the only severe trauma that she had ever experienced. So she was thinking, I'll be in, I'll be out, we'll deal with this. And as we started doing some history taking and a little bit of understanding about her past, because we were digging into her past a little bit, we started realizing there was something else deeper there. So we used a technique called EMDR, which stands for eye movement, I see some nodding, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And people hear eye movements and they're thinking, oh, hypnosis. I don't know how to hypnotize anybody. But it creates this new neural pathway in your brain to be able to reprocess an incident that has previously traumatized you, that has impacted the rest of your life. But people don't know that it's impacted the rest of their life. They feel like, I'm always going to feel like I'm stuck. I'm always going to feel like I'm out of control. So she came in with this one incident saying, I have to get past this. What happened? She saw the movie Black Swan. This was like 10, 15 years ago. I hadn't seen the movie, so I didn't know what it was about, but she said there was a scene in it that just traumatized her. And using the EMDR technique, we started realizing that there was a situation with her dad that made her feel really out of control as a child, and she had completely forgotten about it. And after just 5 sessions, she felt she was completely free of the worries that she was having. She couldn't even stay alone in her own house any longer. She was having to live with somebody else because of the trauma that she was experiencing because of a movie. And it seems absolutely bizarre. It's like, a movie did this to you? But we never know how the brain's going to operate, especially if there's been other trauma that has kind of been squashed down for a while. The brain does funny things. It tries to get you through.
Yeah. Wow. Awesome. Awesome. So we're going to open it up for questions for you guys. And when we close out, I'll also give you guys a chance to talk about, because I didn't really touch on it, about directions, counseling as a group, what you kind of things you guys see people for. And I know that you probably got some of that, but also if they want to get in touch, whether it be with you directly or with just the office in general. So with that, this is where you come in. What questions might you have for Anita and Leslie, whether it be from what you've heard tonight or maybe what you brought with you tonight that you'd like her insights? And then we have Brad has got a mic. He'll come around to you. So if you raise your hand, he'll come around and let you ask.
Thank you for coming in tonight. It's more of a comment, and I'd like your opinion. I suffer from some depression issues, anxiety issues. I got my fair share of traumas. And luckily, I'm seeing a counselor who's wonderful, who's a Christian. I went through many years of the typical, stereotypical counselors who's, okay, concentrate on the crystal, do this, do that. I'm a Christian. What's that? My question or my comment for you guys, and I'd love your opinion, is I have worked hard to come through what I've come through, and I still got a long ways to go. But when I try to take off the mask, the happy mask, the mask that we're trying to get rid of, and I start talking to my Christian friends, they say, put it in God's hands. You don't understand. I have a hard time doing it. No, you need to believe in your faith. You're not faithful enough. You need to put it in God's hands. My question, or what I'd like your opinion on, is how do we deal with people like that as Christians? Because there is, like what Eric said, a stigmata to it. It's people don't understand. This is not something that just goes away overnight.
Yeah.
What would you suggest? How do we deal with situations of that nature?
Thank you for being so vulnerable. We all have friends like that, and that's it's a challenge to have people tell us just to lean into God, or like Anita said, it's the idea of fear is not of God. I think people are trying their very best. So first and foremost, I try to look at other people's their intent is not to do you harm. Their intent is to bless you, because I don't want you to turn against the people that are saying these things. But I think it's also just the idea of saying, thank you for sharing that. I'm not sure that that's going to be helpful for me right now, because it makes me question my faith. And that's what happens. It makes us end up having a crisis of faith when people tell us we're not Christian enough, or we aren't praying enough, or we're not doing it right according to God. So I think letting people know, I know that you're trying your best to help me. It's not being helpful right now. Maybe you could pray for me or pray with me. That would be a blessing. But I think then you start knowing I have to set up boundaries there, and these might not be the people that I'm going to turn to. Is that helpful at all? Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yeah, that's what I would say too. Like, you learn who is safe, right? So you might not disclose quite as much with those people. But sometimes that's hard too, especially if they're living in the home or they're real close, so they might see, that you struggling. But
Or they're in our Bible study group.
right. But, share the most with somebody who is supportive in that way.
Adam, if I may, this is not advice, by the way. I'm just going to tell you one thing that I have done. And I'm stealing this from Brene Brown. And I heard her in an interview talk about the importance of listening to people's stories and believing them. And the idea of these circles comes to my mind. You have these people that are in this circle, right? They're closest to you. Those people that they would stop everything they're doing, and they'll just listen to your story, and they'll believe you. And again, and thank you, Leslie, for it. It's not that the people in the outer circles are bad and I don't like them, and it's just I'm not going to go there with them. I need that inner circle that when I say this is what I'm dealing with, that again they're going to listen and they're going to believe me, and that's been very, very effective. So, for what it's worth.
If I could add in, I don't struggle with anxiety, but I have a person in my life that I'm very close to that does. And I believe that, because in all honesty, even as a therapist, we do not counsel our family first and foremost, but it's the idea of, I would say, I wouldn't say just go to God or anything, or just pray about it, but I would say, it sounds like this is a real struggle for you, and I hope that you get help. But it was really hard for me to experience. And one night the Lord gave me a dream where I was suicidal in the dream. And I woke up, with my throat clenched. I thought I couldn't breathe. And I thought, well, that was an absolute nightmare. But I believe God used it so that I could realize what this person was going through. And I'm like, that's what anxiety is like. Lord, thank you that you gave me that type of a dream. But yeah, it is difficult when someone else doesn't know what it's like to experience severe depression. They're trying their very best to help, but sometimes they don't know the right things to say.
Yeah. Thanks, Adam. Who else? Question.
There, I want to thank you guys for being here. I love what I'm hearing, and I think there's no question in anybody's mind that it would be valuable to start the counseling journey. But what I'm hearing is you will unpack the trauma that you're aware of, and you might even uncover some new trauma that you're not aware of. And it sounds very long, and to be honest, it sounds very expensive. Can you address what insurances typically cover? And there's got to be people who feel that they need to start this journey, but to be honest, they just feel like they don't have that type of expendable cash. Is there hope for someone who doesn't have tons of money that they can just, give toward counseling?
Can I say something, and then I'll let you deal with the insurance
Absolutely.
part? But first of all, we never go anywhere in sessions that clients don't want to go. So if a client is not coming in to work on trauma, like, we don't have to go there. If they just want to work through job stress or a relationship issue, it might turn into something, but we're never like pressuring anybody. So I don't want to give the impression like everybody has trauma, so we're going to dive in deep. Yeah. So that's not necessarily the case. And if that's not your goal, that's not our goal. Okay. So, but for those who do want to go there, and it can be long extended, I'll let you.
Well, I so appreciate this question. I had a client. We are now required as counselors to send out what's called a good faith estimate. And in the good faith estimate, it says, this is our fee. Here's what this would cost you if you attended 6 sessions at full fee. Here's what it would cost you if you attended 12 sessions. Here's what it costs if you have 52 sessions in 1 year. And this client came in yesterday and he goes, is this a requirement? Is this like something that I have to do for 52 weeks? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I never realized that could be the perspective. So thank you. No, this is not a requirement that you have to attend all 52 sessions. One of the things that we do is we say, what are your goals? And so if it isn't the idea of I want to work through this childhood trauma, we will point out to you, this could be an area that you might want to dig into after you give us your story. And the first session is always about history taking. But if you tell us, you know what, I'm just feeling some anxiety about an upcoming job and I want to be able to feel good about that job, we're going to stay focused on that goal. So to answer your question about insurance, not all of us are on insurance panels, but there are several clinicians at our practice that are on insurance panels. The one thing I always tell everybody is that you are responsible for knowing your insurance benefits. Even when I used to be on insurance panels, I would call the insurance company and say, what is this client's benefits? And they would say, this is not a guarantee of any benefits. So they let us know from the beginning. We could submit a claim for them, but it may not be paid out. So I say, know your own benefits, know your deductible, know if you have a co-insurance versus a co-pay, and find out if you've met your deductibles. But we have about 6 insurance panels that we were on at our practice. Now, the question of, we also have a lot of referral resources. We have a whole book. So if there's someone that calls in and says, I can't afford payment, we want to honor that and create space for you. And so we have a list of resources. There is a wonderful agency in Central Ohio called, I think it's called Helping Hands. And I think their number is just 611. And when you call them, they can set you up even with pro bono counseling. So if you do not have the funds, they'll do a little bit of information gathering from you to find out what your household income is and maybe even ask you for a couple of bills that you have, and then they can end up setting you up for free counseling. I will also say we have a sliding fee scale, and we have sometimes interns. And so interns are supervised by somebody who has extreme amount of a number of years of experience. And so you're kind of getting 2 counselors for a very discounted rate. So Philip right now is our intern, and Philip is supervised by Kevin, who was my supervisor 20 years ago. And so he will see people for as low as like $25 per session. And then, like I said, he has to go over those sessions with Kevin, and Kevin gives advice and direction. But he is a student at Ashland Seminary graduating this December. So we have a variety of ways that we might be able to help.
That's great. There are a lot of options.
A lot of options.
That's great. Okay. Who else might have a question for Anita and Leslie?
Thank you for coming out tonight. Information's very insightful. Is it possible for a person to see many, many counselors, and as they're going to each counselor, there's such thing as a setback? From what I understand, I know each counselor has different approaches. But as you're looking for the counselor, concern is it possible for a person to experience a setback and then having to start from scratch again?
That's a heavy one. First of all, I would say, is it possible? It is possible. Not everybody's good at their job. I have experienced that looking for a counselor myself, and I'm like, oh, like, okay, this is enlightening. But also, like, there's no requirement to stay with a person. Like, if you would come see me, and then 2 or 3 sessions, you're like, you know what, like, I don't feel like this is a good fit, call the office and ask for somebody else, or let me know, and we'll match you with somebody who's going to better meet your needs or have a different approach. So as clinicians, we should not be offended. A lot of clients aren't going to tell us, which is fine. They end up going to somebody else on their own, or just don't come back. I don't know. I will say it's rare, though. I'll say it's rare that people don't come back. But you know, you're never obligated to stay with somebody that it doesn't feel right.
And I'll say, I tell clients kind of up front, I'm not all things to all people, and my approach may not work for you. And it will never offend me if you say, this isn't working for me. First of all, I want to know, what can I do better? But I might not be able to do better. And so it's the idea of, can I help you find another counselor that I might think would be a better fit for you? So like Anita said, we're not going to be offended by anything like that. The blessing to us is that you would share it with us, that this isn't working. I've been the counselor that's been seen after 8 other counselors before, and I know how painful that is for the client to keep repeating the story over and over and over again. So really try to get a good grasp from the first or second session. Is this someone that I'm really going to want to work with? Because you're going to be pouring your heart out, and you don't want to have to keep doing that over and over and over again. And I'll also say, if a client is seeing a counselor and then they want to come to me and see me at the same time, I don't do that. Because I say, you need to listen to one person. It's not the idea that I'm going to direct you, but the thing is, we're going to have different approaches, and you're going to get mixed messages, and you're going to walk out feeling more confused than ever. So choose one counselor.
Yeah, and you can always request. So maybe you don't know what technique you need, like CBT or, you know, all the things, but you can say, I need somebody who's warm and welcoming, or I need somebody who's very direct, right? So you can ask, like, for personality, style, and the receptionist knows, like, the receptionists have interviewed us, they've gotten our feel for the clients that we enjoy working with and how we approach people. And, you know, we all interact with each other, so they know our personality. So you can always ask for things like that.
I did recently have a client tell me, your warm, fuzzy approach isn't working for me. And I'm like, thank you for letting me know. I don't know that I'll ever be more direct than this, because my idea is creating empathic space for you. So I can help you try to look for someone that might be more direct and not warm and fuzzy.
Or the combination, like, I want the warm and direct. Like, that's kind of how I am.
Yeah,
like, so.
And I think also, too, and my own personal experience, you're trying to set us up for success.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's kind of the big goal here, and that's very powerful. Anybody else? What other questions might you have? So I think we've got two.
Not sure how to turn this on. Here we go. Yay. So my question is, what's the impact, do you think, of social media on mental health? And how would you counsel someone to kind of put safeguards up for that?
How much time do we have?
As much as you need, Leslie.
Yeah, that would be a
I also have a soapbox under here if you'd like to.
Where's my pulpit? Yeah, I believe, so let me answer it this way. We have 4 specialists that deal with children. And it is one of the #1 issues, I believe, that our child therapists are dealing with. And they will work down from age 3 up through young adulthood. But social media has created this belief of what we need to look like, how we need to think, how we need to agree. It's where a lot of the millennial generation and even Gen X and probably Gen Y, that's where they're getting news. And so it's messing with a lot of people. And I mean, think about it. If I'm looking at a pair of boots on Facebook or on Instagram, I'm going to get boots over and over on Instagram or on Facebook. So it's very influential. If I'm looking at how many people give the fish lips, I'm going to start seeing a lot more of the fish lips on Instagram and social media. If I start looking at skinny pictures, it develops eating disorders, it develops depression, it develops anxiety, this whole comparison culture. Yeah. I could sit here for
So
hours.
part of the question was, what do you do with that
Yeah.
as clinicians? So first of all, we have to assess if it's an actual addiction, because it definitely can be. And then, there are techniques that work for any addiction. You have to do something else during that time that you're typically on your phone. So you have to provide a different routine in your day instead of reaching for it. The minute you wake up, your phone is in the other room. Oh no, it's my alarm. I can't put it in the other room. Okay, well, can we have settings turned off or parental, guidelines? Can you have a support person in your life that's going to help, keep you accountable? And just set up some strategies. First of all, is the person aware, the client, are they aware enough to know how it's affecting them? If they're not, then that makes it a little bit more challenging. But part of our job is to guide the questions, to give them insight, so that they can have realizations, and to, I love motivational interviewing. It's this technique, to get clients to realize things with their own words rather than us telling them, well, you shouldn't do that, or how's that working, So that's really tricky and time consuming to change those patterns, because nobody's going to give up their phone forever. It's kind of like people with an eating disorder, like you have to have food, and phone today is kind of necessary. Like we want it for emergencies and we want it to connect. So to do away with it altogether really isn't reasonable, but how can we manage it and put some barriers? So many conversations and techniques to be tried, and then talk about, okay, what worked for you, what didn't work for you, and how can we tweak this?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Maybe we could do a whole one on that, right?
Right.
All right. So I think, Terry?
I'm doing this for somebody else. I have a question. It's the person's on depressions, medicines for the last 25 years. They just recently changed their medications. And I was wondering, Anita, you talked about coping skills. I'm not a naturalist, but I like to get people off meds whenever they're taking them. How do you get to the, how do you instruct somebody on coping skills to help them through the depression?
Well, first of all, medication is only one tool, right? So they might be on meds enough to, lift the mood, but that doesn't teach them coping skills, right? There's still things they have to do. So we kind of talk about what they want their life to look like. Do you Somebody might say, well, I used to exercise, I don't do that anymore because I'm not motivated. And well, so the first thing is, if we sit and wait to be motivated, like it's never going to come, but taking action creates motivation. So then we talk about how can we do the next very easy step that's above what you're already doing to feel better. So it's like this holistic approach of coping skills too. Like, how can I feel better spiritually? How can I feel better physically? How can I address the thoughts that I have, the self-deprecation or believing that life is horrible all the time, which is a lie. Like, how true is this statement that everybody hates me or I'm worthless and nobody'd care if I was gone? Like those kind of thoughts that can come with depression.
Where is the truth coming from, and where is who they really rely on for the truth? So yeah, that really makes a big difference.
Yeah.
It's not God, but somebody in their house that they're really relying on instead.
Yeah, and so.
Is there a steering wheel?
I mean, if you're talking about somebody's in their home that is helpful and can keep them accountable and be supportive, right? That's always a great thing. Sometimes people live with people who are putting them down, that are creating, some of the toxicity that is guiding their depression. And then it's super difficult, right? Because we can't heal where we're getting sick. And there's just so many aspects to look at with depression. I'm not sure if I answered your question. Coping skills, working on our thoughts, gratitude journaling, identifying what we're feeling is important, but not embracing it as a lifestyle. So yes, I feel bad today, but tomorrow's going to be a better day. Can we say that to ourselves? And even if we don't believe it, can we get up and act like tomorrow's going to be a better day, which means I'm going to get a shower today? Just certain steps depending the level of depression.
Okay. Right. Anyone else? Any other questions for Anita or Leslie? I guess we'll say going once. Going twice. I think that. No, right? Okay. Yes, please. Over here, John, with Sue.
In our changing world, it's evoking all kinds of emotions and thoughts in our society and our culture. And there is a rise in addictions and domestic violence. For a woman who is caught in a situation with domestic violence, I understand it's a cycle. What are your thoughts on how to support that woman? And I know there's all kinds of circumstances and situations, but just your thoughts.
Yeah, so first of all, the frustrating part about watching somebody in those situations is you so badly just want them to get out, right? That would solve everything, we think, but they're caught. And I would say the biggest thing is to let them know over and over that you're there when they're ready. And hopefully someday they'll be ready before something terrible happens. But they need support just to hear, you're going to hear the same story over and over, and you're like, why do you keep doing this? Like, just leave, just get out. And they feel like they can't, and that has to be respected, as frustrating as it is. But if they know that you're the one that they can call the moment that they decide to get out, like, you need people they need somebody in their life. Sometimes just giving them resources plants a seed, right? So do they know about the women's shelter in the area? Do they know who to call? And something. I know every phone I learned, if I push the button 3 times on the side of my phone, whoever I have in my emergency contact, it sends my location and an audio. So talking about like, how can we set up as many safety measures as possible? I know as clinicians, we would, they're not ready to leave. We have to respect that. But how can you have some safety plans? If you're in a situation and you need to get out, can you escape this way? Can you not let yourself be, blocked into a corner? Just kind of things. But as friends, as family, you just have to hear the frustration over and over. And a lot of times the abuser will alienate them, isolate them, and that's hard, but pray. God can work miracles, but just be there for when they are ready is the biggest advice.
It's hard to not intervene on situations like that. Yeah, it's so hard.
And sometimes too, and here's a good question, sometimes people don't have the strength, and a good question is to say, do you wish somebody would come in and take you out of this situation? Do you want that? If they say yes, then you can take charge, like they're giving you permission. And that has happened on occasion. Somebody doesn't feel strong enough to do it on their own or to take that step, but if they have 1 or 2 friends or family members that they're willing to just go pick them up and get them out of there, they might, but they have to give you permission to say, yes, that's what I want, I just can't do it myself.
Yeah. Anyone else in the back? I'm sorry.
Just a practical question. Let's say you're a small group leader at this church and you have an individual in your group who dies. What would you do? What would be some steps that you would do as a small group leader to encourage or come alongside the family or the individuals that are closest to those people that are part of your small group? How would you handle that?
I think that's the beauty of small group. It's like your own little family. And I think just creating space. I love that word, creating space. But it's creating space for the grieving process, because a lot of times when people are going through grieving, they struggle to ask for help. They want to isolate. They want to sometimes grieve alone. So you just have to know that person. And I think the more that you can let the person know and continue to reach out to them day after day, I'm thinking of you, I'm praying for you, I'm available to you. I'd like to bring by some soup. I'd like to bring by a meal. But letting them know that you're available to them. What I hear over and over is that people are afraid to reach out because they're thinking, that might be the one moment they're not sitting in their grief. That might be the one moment they're not thinking about what they're going through. And then if I reach out to them, but I can guarantee you when someone's going through grief, they're going to keep going through grief for quite a while. And so I think asking them to talk about things and asking them, tell me what your favorite memory was. Tell me about, the last moments that you spent with them. Don't avoid the topics that you're afraid of touching on, because they really want to talk 9 times out of 10. And and then allow them also, if it's not something you want to talk about, don't feel required to talk about it, but I want to create space for you to be able to talk about it.
Anyone else as we get close to finishing up tonight? Any other questions? So I can't thank both of you enough. I had the pleasure of meeting and talking with him prior to putting this together, and I'm so happy we were able to pull this off. I don't know if that's that right. Is that the right way to say it? We pulled it off? It's like a bank robbery or something. But yeah, right. And we do appreciate you coming out tonight on a Tuesday evening to listen. Again, this is hopefully first in many of these types of events. We really want to make this an intentional thing for Violet, for you. And who knows, maybe as you've had a good experience, hopefully tonight, you could tell someone else, whether it be inside of Violet or even outside in the community, I gotta believe it's out there too, and the need for the help is there. So with that, we will dismiss, and I think this is the part that I always forget. I should probably close in prayer. Would you think that's a good idea? That's a lovely idea. So let's close in prayer, and I'll let you get on with your night. Father, we thank you for being here. We thank you that you desire our best. You love us. You love us like no one else could, no one else will. I pray, Father, that we would remember that as we're going home tonight, as we maybe address the struggles, the things that maybe we know we need to work on. You are a loving Father. You're a good Father, and we're grateful for that. In Christ's name, amen. Thanks, everyone. Thank you both. Thank you.